morning, members. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I want to thank Tommy and the AILG for the opportunity. There are two topics I'd like to cover this morning. The first topic is to describe the budget process to you, to give you some idea of the experience in Westmeath County Council, make some comments on the process, and hopefully critically appraise the process. The second topic, and it's very much related topic, is to say a few words on the importance to a local authority of maintaining its income base. Members, I know that's quite a distance away from you. You don't have to be able to read every word in it, and I'm sure the presentations will be made available to you. But what I've tried to do is get the revised budget process as set out in the Local Government Reform Act onto one screen and hopefully encapsulate the process for you. The process as set out in the Local Government Reform Act, which you all would have engaged on very soon after being elected, about a year ago. The first part of the process is the public consultation on the local property tax. That process involves a 30-day consultation period, out of which there's a report compiled by the Chief Executive, which feeds into the budget strategy. In the case of Westmeath, we had 11 responses on the public process, 2 by letter and 9 by email. Each and every one of them were of the view that the local property tax should be reduced. Each and every one of them didn't comment as to what service should be reduced or discontinued as a result of the suggestion to reduce the local property tax. From there, the CPG meet with the Chief Executive and the Head of Finance to consider the budget strategy. This I would have considered a useful process. It looked at the overall financial position, considered really big questions like rates harmonisation, which affects not all, but the bulk of local authorities. Consider what you might do in terms of the rates on vacant premises. The really important consideration of the variation in the basic rate of local property tax, and the consideration of the general municipal allocation. So we would have met with the CPG, and from that we would have circulated the members with the written report that addressed those items. The next step was the meeting on the variation of the local property tax. Again, it's defined in legislation what were the issues and aspects that the council had to take into account, which included an estimated income and expenditure account for the following year, effectively a draft budget, the financial position of the local authority, its assets, its liabilities, its revenue position, the estimation of the financial effect of any change in the property tax, which is something I'll go back to, and the result of the feedback, the result of the consultation process. So as a result of that, members had to make a decision by the 30th of September as to what we should or shouldn't do in relation to the variation of local property tax. The revenue commissioners had to be informed before midnight on September 30th. The minister had to be notified, and a public notice had to be published. Subsequent to that, members had to meet at district level to consider how they might prioritise the general municipal allocation. This meeting was held prior to the statutory budget meeting, with no provision for its adjournment, and the results of it were taken into account by the Chief Executive in the formation of the draft budget. That's something we might talk about in the questions and answers section, because that's something that certainly didn't work in last meeting. It's a step in the budget process that I would have a particular concern about. So step 6, you're at your budget meeting, which is probably one of the most important reserve functions that members carry out. And at that meeting, you have the estimated income and expenditure, which is your draft budget, your 3-year capital programme, and the budget as presented would take into account proposals in relation to the items that were considered on at least one, if not more than one occasion in the steps prior to this. That's rates harmonisation, rates on vacant premises, and variation in the basic rate of LPT, in addition to the full spectrum of the budget that you would normally be engaged in. So subsequent to that, you have your meeting on the schedule of municipal district works, quite a useful one in my view, which is held after the statutory budget meeting. Members who weren't first elected a year ago would see this as akin to the area meetings that used to take place with regard to the roads budget. But this is much wider than that, and can be, to my mind, a very useful step. And obviously it has to have due regard. It has to have due regard to the adopted budget. So members, that's the revised budget process, which is a significant revision on what happened heretofore. In terms of critically appraising it, the input and decisions from members are very significant in steps 2, 4, and 6 in particular. And members, to my mind, if I was a member of a county council, that's where I'd want to be. I'd want to be in the decision-making process. And whatever the difficulties that exist with the revised budget process, which we'll talk about in a second, I think it's true to say that there certainly is a much more significant involvement for our members in the budget process than heretofore. And to my mind, if I was a member, that's what I would wish for. Not saying it's easy, but that's what I would wish for. In terms of, this is sort of my personal view on it, but in terms of what's wrong with it, I believe it's too long, members. And that last item that came in there at the bottom, those letters are months. So it's July to the following January. And to my mind, by definition, an annual budget happens every year. And for a process that happens every year to consume 6 to 7 months doesn't seem to me to make sense. The decision-making process is out of sequence and it's truncated, and there are decisions and decision-making that's happening in a truncated fashion and that are set apart from each other. So, for example, I don't believe that it's useful or reasonable to be asking members to make a decision on local property tax in September that's going to potentially significantly impact the decision that you make in the budget process in November. Likewise, I don't believe it's useful to be looking at a general municipal allocation, irrespective of what it might contain, in an environment where you don't know the size of the cake that you have to split up. It is the first year of a very much revised process. There is ongoing work to look at how it might be made better and how it might work better. And I would suggest that that might be a useful and fertile ground for the questions and the discussions that might take place after the presentations. Just moving on to the second topic of the importance of maintaining income. There's a number of items I'd just like to briefly discuss here. On the macroeconomic front, I suppose what you do when you're looking at the national position and the economy in general is you look at the various experts that are out there. And if you look at, again, members, not for reading, certainly from the distance that you're sitting, but if you look at the latest report from the Fiscal Advisory Council, it looks at risks that are relevant and pertinent in its assessment of the government's fiscal position. And it's looking there at oil prices, exchange rates, household debt, competitiveness, the euro area growth, global financial markets, deflation, and the banking system, and geopolitical risks. Now, we're not going to get into them, you'll be delighted to know on Saturday morning in any detail. But the point I'm making there is that there are two upsides and 7 downsides. Members, local government reform. I've been 13 years in this environment, 5 years as head of finance, 20 years prior to that in private industry. Certainly for the members in the room that weren't newly elected last June, and the members that were, there's been an incredible number of activities resulting in the area of local government reform and its impact on the sector. Certainly the mergers and unification, there's no doubt that that has brought efficiencies and has released staff to work in other areas. But those other areas have increased hugely as a result of local government reform. We have the formation of the LEO, the LCDC, SICAP, the establishment of Irish Water, the establishment of the municipal districts. Very, very significant local government reform, with each and every one of them containing significant risks around the financial management of those changes. Again, the importance of maintaining income, the tiger legacies, land loans that local authorities have been left to pay, the mortgage book, worse in some local authorities than others, but a very significant problem for the sector. Local authorities paying local property tax on its own dwellings without the ability to recoup it. So there are very significant overhangs. Capital deficits are arising from the housing programme in the period from, say, 2002 to 2009. So there are very significant burdens that overhang the sector that still need to be dealt with. The management of expectations as we emerge from the national and global recession. Members are aware of the recent pay agreement and the implications for that for the sector. So members, there's a huge amount of burdens and risks there that the sector need to be aware of, and each individual local authority needs to take into account in terms of its assessment of what income it needs to get the job done. The three items I just focus on, and I'll do them in reverse order. Charges for local services. So important to, certainly there is a view there, and one that I would hold, that if you provide something for nothing, it's never appreciated as much as if you charge for it. If you are charging for it, it's important that you revisit it on an ongoing basis, whether it's a 1% increase or 2% increase, but you don't miss the opportunity as part of the budget process to maximise your income. Harmonisation of rates, huge problem, huge issue for certain local authorities with the variance between the ARV that existed in the town council and the ARV for the county. And it's hugely important as you manage that process that you protect your income. That's not easy, because it means that to protect your income, it means that a certain portion of the cohort will pay more and a certain portion of the cohort will pay less. It's a very difficult square to circle, or circle to square. It's a challenge. And the variation of the basic rate of LPT is probably one of the more important of the three, or most important of the three, potentially, is a huge challenge. Just in the case of Westmeath, a variation of 15% in the basic rate of LPT, and 15% is the maximum change that members have within their power. If I look at 100 property owners, 38 out of 100 are in the 0 to 100 grand property band. So they would be subject to a change of 14 euro per annum. 14 euro per annum, a change of 15% in the local property tax. The next band, another 38, will be subject to a change of 34 euro per annum. And in the next band, 150 to 200,000, it's 18, who will be subject to 47 euro. So, members, if the members in Westmeath County Council were to change the basic rate of local property tax by its maximum, 94% of property owners would see a change of 47 euro per annum or less. In the case, the national equivalent would be 75%. So 75% of property owners are in the first three bands. It's 94% in Westmeath. As against that, the impact for the local authority of that change would be almost €1 million. And I've just set out for members information the sort of spend we have on, the total spend we have on areas like local roads and street cleaning and fire services and libraries. And members, I am standing here in front of you, and I'm not a rep, I'm not a county councillor, I'm a financial professional. I don't have the burden that you have to carry, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point that out to you. So members, I'm sure, and I hope there'll be lots of questions and comments arising from that. I want to thank you for your attention, and look forward to answering any questions.